Now an official good morning, everyone. Is everyone ready for Christmas? Am I seeing any hesitation besides my own? I have wrapped maybe 5% of the gifts that I have to wrap. I was thinking last night that I remember when our boys were small and we would gleefully try to come up with wonderful, magical surprises for them to discover this time of year. Wonderful moments where belief is engaged. Magic throughout this whole season. And someday I will get to do that again with grandchildren, but no rush, for sure. For sure. But recently it has seemed to me, shopping and stuff, it has seemed to me that we're at a certain point, we're just checking off lists when it comes to the grown-up version of this season. And I realize that the idea of giving gifts to people in my life is beautiful, and I love the idea of celebrating them, but that the real heart of why we give those gifts has become sort of a quiet background noise, right? So why do we give gifts? Yes, it is to celebrate those that we love. Yes, it is to spread joy and cheer. Yes, it is to bring people together, but where did the practice come from? I've always thought of it two ways. Okay, first is the gifts of the Magi. They brought gifts to the child who would be the ambassador of peace and the emissary of joy for all humankind, or this is what Matthew tells us. Incidentally, according to Matthew, they brought gifts to a home, not a stable. I'm sorry, that's Luke. I typoed. Luke said this. Luke said a home, not a stable. And it was well after Jesus' birth. If you read it, it talks about the boy. At least in my version. Does it in yours? Okay. It talks about a boy. So it was a home, not a stable. It may have been several years after his birth. Luke talks about shepherds being frightened by angels telling them of a Messiah being born, a babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, and they go to see a child at the inn where there was no room, right? But only Matthew talks about mages. And somehow we have combined the two stories so that these priests, these Zoroastrian priests, without cars or planes or a skateboard or a pogo stick or skates, somehow they all showed up alongside these shepherds to pose for the beautiful crash statuettes that we adorn our homes and churches with. But no, the mages were scattered far and wide. So it took time. It took a long, long time. And that really has no bearing on my original point, which I started this whole tirade explaining. So why do we give gifts? First, the Magi's gifts, we give symbolically. But second, it is to symbolize the gift the world was given in the child we came to know as Jesus. And we can all agree that the gift of his presence found in the stories of his time, the year, is precious, right? It is well over 2,000 years later, and people are still celebrating him. Many are also still misquoting and misunderstanding him, and that too has been going on for over 2,000 years. But I've digressed again. I believe we have a Jabberwock to meet today, don't we? We've been exploring the sacred symbol of the circle, and if you haven't been with us, then you don't know that somehow, quite without any active thought going on in my brain, it suddenly, and I mean suddenly, out of nowhere, occurred to me that that poem by Lewis Carroll, The Jabberwocky, the very same poem that Johnny Depp recited as the Mad Hatter, that it made sense. And that sense is part of the circle. Okay, and hang with me if you're curious and you want to know how this works. Last week, if you remember, we got our warning, right? Beware the Jabberwock, the jub bird and the frumious bandersnatch, the claws that catch the jaws that bite. And we sought our manxome foe for a long time until we surrendered our search, ending our time together beneath that wonderful tum-tum tree, right? Resting, breathing, believing that maybe, just maybe, the work was done for a while. The search had ended and nothing horrible had happened. We breathed a little bit easier. We saw clearly that it wasn't a cosmic prophecy, but it's often just a habit of mind. A bunch of really loud, illusory scenarios playing in thought, which send out loud invitations, often through really obnoxious messengers, for those scenarios to play out in our lives. Remember what Jesus said in the Gospel of Thomas last week. Be prepared against the world. Arm yourself with great strength so that robbers cannot find a way to reach you, for the trouble you expect will come. And he ended that whole thing saying, let there be one among you who understands. Well, there's a room full of us last week, right? Who understand that when we send out the invitation to fear, and when we give it validity and possibility, it arrives. The same is true of love and kindness and good. And it felt good to realize that it all depends on what's going on up here. So we leaned on that metaphorical tree and we took a breath and let ourselves believe. Okay, I've gotten through those fears that I had. I've broken the habit of judging everything and creating new fears and sending out new invitations. That part is finished, right? You know that feeling. It's when you've done the work, or you've had the breakthrough, and you've cried the tears, and you've journaled the journaling. Who else has done that? No? I'm alone? Okay. Or you've talked to God, or to a therapist, or to your dog. And you think to yourself, healing complete, I'm evolved now. It's all good. And then Spirit smiles and lovingly says, oh, sweetheart, we're not done yet. We're deepening here. And then gives you the next stanza of the poem of your life. And as an uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the tulgey wood and burbled as it came. Well, that doesn't sound restful, does it? Not so much. It's as if life said, oh, you're feeling peaceful? Wonderful. Let's play with that. Because this is something big. Sometimes the most sacred moments of awakening, they, believe it or not, they don't come wrapped in angel wings and candlelight. In my experience and observation, the most powerfully transformative moments come when people allow themselves to be vulnerable. Sometimes the most powerful progress is made when fear stalks through the tulgey wood with eyes of flame and making nonsense noises. Sometimes they look like the return of an old fear we thought we healed, or an old insecurity we were sure that we'd outgrown, or a pattern in ourselves that we truly believed was gone for good. And suddenly, there it is again. It's right in front of us, alive and loud and emotional, charged, and seemingly full of enough vigor to really mess with you, right? Not because we failed in letting it all go, not because the healing didn't work, And it doesn't mean that we're back to the beginning and have to start the shedding process all over again. It shows up like that because awakening happens in layers. You already let go of what you needed to in order to get where you stand now. But when it comes up later, it's telling you that you're ready to grow some more. The poem says that this moment arrives while he is standing in uffish thought, which I absolutely love. This is not a careless moment. This is not immaturity or aloofness. I think of it like when you've just accomplished something big and you're kind of worn out from all of the work, so you head to your comfiest seat in the house. We all have our own seat in the house, right? Okay, so you head to that seat and you flop down bonelessly and say, oof, I am so glad I got through all that. That to me is what was happening there. And as you've done that, you kind of start and reflect on that all, right? Okay, he is reflecting here. He's becoming aware. And it is precisely there in introspection that growing awareness can become something more. In sincere spiritual seeking, free from all thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes which held us prisoner, that is when something inside finally feels strong enough, or perhaps frightened or threatened enough, to step forward and say, okay, now deal with me. Eyes of flame, meaning charged emotion, deep memory, ego defenses, unresolved shame, long-held fear. Not evil, just intense, right? It's the told ye would. It's simply life. Messy and layered, not always easy to navigate. And that final line, it burbled as it came, meaning it speaks nonsense. Fear almost always does. Ego always does. Unworthiness always does. It sounds so convincing, right? But if you look closely, if you stand and you view it all from above, looking at the whole picture instead of anchoring in the stories and following them where they lead and making you feel horrible, if you stand up here and you pay attention kind of objectively, you will see that it never quite makes sense. None of it. Okay? You're not good enough, but there's no evidence to back that. Everyone will leave, but there is no hint that they might. How about you're too much, but the people around you keep asking for more? Ain't that a kick in the head, right? Dean Martin said that. I actually had to look it up. But we tell ourselves that we're the problem right in the midst of everyone around us celebrating us as the solution. How about you're not enough, when really people seem to want you around all the time? How about you have to stay small? You don't deserve it. But that spotlight keeps screaming for you to step in and shine. You don't belong. But the group just made you a cake with your name on it and handed you a membership card. Listen. Really get still and listen. Listen inside of you. Can you hear love whisper back? I never said any of that about you. It's nonsense. It's grammatically correct. It's emotionally believable, but it's spiritually false. And here is where the lesson in that circle matters the most, because in some churches, this would be the moment when the sermon tells us opposition has arrived. danger, enemy, battle, defeat. But that doesn't fit the idea of a circle. A circle doesn't introduce villains because a circle cannot contain anything outside itself. So the Jabberwock cannot be a foreign invader. It can only be something within us asking to be seen so that it can finally be free. So now before we go any farther forward, before we move forward and fight that snarling, nasty Jabberwock, I want to pause here and offer you some reassurance. This is not going to be the part of the service where we scare the tinkle out of anyone, because I will not be cleaning the pews after the service. So we're not here to be frightened, okay? We are here to be freed. In other words, this isn't about fearing the Jabberwock. This is about loving the places in us that still believe in it. Because in a world of oneness, in a circle, there can be no monsters that come from somewhere else. Everything arises inside God, inside love, inside consciousness. So even this moment of fight, this confrontation, is holy. Even the scariest Jabberwock belongs to the story of our awakening. Leonard Jacobson says it beautifully. He says, awakening is not about denying or banishing the hidden parts of ourselves, but embracing them in love so deeply that they no longer need to scream. Which brings us to our next stanza. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went, snicker snack. This is not violence. We do not kill the ego. We do not slay the self. We do not mutilate our humanity. The battle takes place in the most sacred place in existence. Right here, behind the rib cage. In the pause between the story that the mind tells you and the truth that the soul knows. 1, 2, 1, 2. It isn't sword play or even word play the way that we're looking at it. This is rhythm. Returning to presence again and again. The vorpal blade isn't a weapon, it's awareness. It's praying, it's grounding, it's breath. It's every moment we pause and refuse to treat fear as unquestionable authority. And in that steady, sacred rhythm, illusion cannot keep standing. Not because we attacked it or beat it down and conquered it, but because it runs out of ways to justify itself in the light of love. And in doing so, it reveals that it's always been nothing but a smoke screen obscuring our view of perfection. The poem says, he left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. Again, this is not murder. I never thought I'd say that word from up here, but it isn't. Okay, what dies here is the story, the drama, the false identity, the imaginary threat. The head that he carries is symbolic, meaning the fear no longer has control of his thinking. And the moment fear loses its throne in our awareness, joy enters. And if I can turn the page, I'll tell you. See, he doesn't march back in triumph. He doesn't stride back victorious and very proud of himself. He galumphs, which to me is maybe one of the holiest and most spiritual words Lewis Carroll ever wrote. Because the picture in my mind's eye is sort of like sloppy arm-flinging skipping with a huge smile and wide eyes. That is galumphing to me. We've done it as children. I sometimes still do. But he galumphs back toward love, toward home, toward belonging, with relief and with humor and with that childlike, oh yay, it's done! Thank goodness, here I am. Because here's the heart of it. He didn't return to the circle, to the one. He realized he never left it. No part of this story, not the warning, not the fear, not the Jabberwock, not the sword, not even the trembling, not one part of it happened outside of God. Every part of the journey unfolded inside love, inside presence, inside oneness. Awakening doesn't kick us out of humanity. It simply helps humanity remember where it actually lives. In God, in love, in one, in all. So let me ask you gently, what Jabberwock has been whispering nonsense at you lately? What story has sounded convincing but hasn't actually been true? Where has fear claimed authority over a life already held in infinite love? Because in this circle, this oneness, nothing stands outside of love. I spend all this time writing, and I can't turn a page. Nothing stands beyond redemption. Nothing is exiled. Whatever has come whiffling through the Tulgey wood has not come to destroy you. It has come to finally be healed in the only place that healing has ever been possible. Right here. In presence. In love. In God. In the circle we never left and never could. May we recognize illusion when it burbles. May we breathe. May we remember. May truth do what truth does. And may we, with just a little holy silliness, may we galump our way back into joy, back into belonging, back into the awareness that we are and always have been home. If you take nothing away from my talk except this, hear me when I say, you aren't loved because you've conquered your fear or done anything else. You are loved because love cannot do anything else. Let us pray. Spirit of infinite wholeness, circle without beginning or end, center in which all life rests. Thank you for the courage to meet what appears frightening and the wisdom to know it is something, only something inside us that is waiting to be loved. Thank you for every movement toward awakening, for every breath of clarity, for every gentle return to peace. Help us trust that nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal can last. And as we walk through the tulgey woods of our daily lives, let your love remain the rhythm of our being. Steady, sure, kind, until joy returns, until laughter loosens the heart, until we remember fully and gladly that we have never once stepped outside your embrace. And so it is. Amen.